My mother told me for 10 years she was keeping my inheritance safe. She spent every cent of it on herself. My grandmother raised me more than my mother did. When I was young, my mother worked long hours, and my grandmother picked up everything she didn't. She walked me to school, she helped with homework, she taught me how to cook, how to do laundry, how to balance a checkbook. When I was 15, she sat me down at her dining table and told me she had an account set aside for me. She said it had a little over $80,000 in it, money she'd been putting away since the day I was born. She told me my mother would be in charge of it until I turned 25, and then it would be mine to use for a house or school or whatever I needed to get started. Then she looked at me and said something I didn't understand at the time. She said, "If your mother ever tells you the money changed or the amount is different, you come find me." I said okay, but I didn't really know what she meant. My grandmother passed away when I was 19. That was the worst year of my life. At the funeral, my mother told me she knew about the account and that she would take care of it. She said not to worry. I didn't. I trusted her. When I was 21, I asked about the money for the first time. She said it was sitting there and I shouldn't think about it until I was 25. When I was 22, I asked again because I was finishing school and trying to plan. She said the account had paperwork attached and she was still sorting it out. Be patient, she said. When I was 23, I noticed my mother had redone her entire cooking area. New cabinets, stone countertops, new appliances. I asked how she paid for it. She said she'd been saving. That same year, she bought a new car off the lot. When I was 24, she went on 2 trips, one to Miami and one to a mountain resort with friends. She came back from both with shopping bags. She redecorated her living room and told me she deserved nice things after working so hard. She said she was finally living for herself. I remember sitting on her brand new couch thinking I was glad for her. I had no idea I was paying for all of it. I turned 25 and asked for my inheritance. She said she needed a few more weeks to get everything in order. A few weeks became 2 months. I asked again and she said the bank was holding things up. I asked which bank and she changed the subject. When I asked a third time, she got annoyed. She said I was being pushy and ungrateful and that she had been managing this responsibility for years. I told her it had been 10 years and I just wanted to know when to expect it. She told me I'd get it when she was ready. That's when I knew something was wrong. I went to my grandmother's bank with both our names and asked if there was an account connected to us. There wasn't. Nothing. The woman at the counter told me an account under my grandmother's name had been closed 6 years earlier. 6 years. I was 19 when my grandmother died. My mother closed it right after the funeral. I drove to my mother's house and asked where the money was. She said the account had fees and the money got eaten up over time. I told her I went to the bank. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said she needed it. She said raising me alone was expensive and my grandmother never helped her the way she should have. She said the money should have gone to her in the first place because she was the daughter, not me. She said $80,000 was nothing compared to what she gave up being my mother. I asked her about the renovated cooking area. She didn't answer. I asked about the car. She looked at the floor. I asked about Miami and the resort and the clothes and the luggage. She told me I was keeping score and that's not how family works. I told her my grandmother had warned me this would happen. I told her that when I was 15, my grandmother told me the exact amount and said if the number ever changed to come find her. My mother's face changed. I saw the guilt there, but guilt wasn't going to make her fix it. I told her she had 1 week to figure out how she was going to pay me back every single dollar. She actually laughed and said I was being dramatic. She thought this was just me venting, something she could wait out. What she didn't know was that I'd already gone back to the bank and requested copies of everything. I had the withdrawal dates. I had the paperwork showing when the account closed. She thought this was a fight she could win by talking. I was done talking. I picked up my phone and called Jalen. He's been my closest friend since we were teenagers and the only person in my life I trust all the way through. He picked up on the second ring and I told him everything. The account, the bank, the way my mother reacted when I confronted her. When I finished, Jalen went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She closed that account the same year your grandmother died. She was spending it while you were still grieving. You need a lawyer." I hadn't thought about a lawyer yet. I was still trying to wrap my head around being lied to for 6 straight years. But Jalen was right. This wasn't just a family argument. The next morning, I called a legal aid office and they set me up with a lawyer for a phone call that afternoon. The lawyer listened carefully and asked how my mother had ended up in charge of the account and whether there was anything in writing. I told her my grandmother set it up and put my mother in charge until I turned 25. The lawyer said if my mother was given control of money meant for my benefit and spent it on herself, that could be a breach of fiduciary duty. She had a legal obligation to protect that money and she broke it. Then the lawyer asked about written proof. I thought about that for a moment and then I remembered something. My grandmother was careful about everything. She kept records of every bill, every payment, every receipt. She had folders organized by year and she used to say that paper doesn't lie and if you ever need to prove something, you better have it in writing. If anyone would have left a trail, it was her. I thanked the lawyer and said I might have something. I just needed to go find it. That weekend I drove to my grandmother's old house. She'd been gone for 6 years, but I still remembered every turn to get there. The house looked different now. New garden, different curtains. A neighbor had lived next door to my grandmother for over 20 years. I knocked on the door and when she answered, I told her who I was. I said I was Lucy's granddaughter and asked if by any chance she'd left anything behind. Any files, any boxes, anything at all. The neighbor looked at me for a second and then her face softened. She said, "Your grandmother gave me a box before she passed. She said to hold on to it and that someone might come asking for it one day." My chest went tight. Lucy knew. She planned for this. Even at the end, she was still looking out for me. The neighbor went inside and came back carrying a small cardboard box. I sat on the porch steps and opened it. Inside were bank statements from the account, printed out and organized by date. There was a notarized document naming me as the sole beneficiary. My name on it, Lucy's signature on it, official. And underneath everything was a handwritten letter in Lucy's writing. I'd know it anywhere because she used to leave notes in my lunchbox when I was little. The same slanted letters, the same hard pen marks. I unfolded it and read it. It said, "If you're reading this, it means your mother did what I was afraid she'd do. I love her, but I know her. This money was always yours. Don't let anyone tell you different. Everything you need to prove it is in this box." I had to stop reading because I couldn't see the words anymore. I sat on that porch and cried. Not the angry kind I'd been doing all week. This was different. This was the kind of crying you do when someone who loved you reaches out from the past and holds your hand exactly when you need it. Lucy wasn't here anymore, but she was still protecting me. She knew my mother would take it. She knew I'd come looking, and she made sure I wouldn't come empty-handed. When I finally pulled myself together, I took pictures of every document, every bank statement, the notarized paper, both sides of the letter. I saved them to my phone, emailed them to myself, and sent copies to Jalen. 3 separate places. Because Lucy taught me that. She taught me to protect what matters. I sent copies to the lawyer that same day. She looked through everything and said I had a strong case. She said my mother's best option was to agree to a repayment plan before things went any further. I decided to give my mother one more chance before it went legal. I called and said I needed to come over Saturday to talk. She agreed, sounding annoyed, still certain she could talk her way out of this. She didn't know I wasn't coming to talk. I was coming to show her what Lucy left behind. I drove to her house with the box on the passenger seat. The outside had been repainted. The front door was new. I let myself in the way I always did. The renovated cooking area hit me first. The island with the stone top, the cushioned bar stools, the hanging light fixtures that looked like something out of a magazine. I set the box on the counter and said nothing. My mother had a mug of coffee and leaned against the far counter looking at me like I was wasting her Saturday. Then she said, "I think your grandmother would be disappointed in how you're acting." She said it like she'd been practicing it all week. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I opened the box. I laid the notarized document on the counter, then the stack of bank statements, then Lucy's letter, handwritten, hard pen marks, slanted letters. I slid everything toward her and said, "Read it." Her jaw tightened when she saw the document. She recognized the bank statements. Then her fingers, slightly shaking, moved to the letter. She picked it up and read it in silence. I watched her face the entire time, the way her lips pressed together, the way her nostrils flared. When she finished, she set the letter down and looked at the stone counter for a long time. The room was so quiet I could hear the fridge humming behind her. I waited for something real, remorse, an apology, something that sounded like a mother who knew she hurt her child. I didn't get it. She pushed the letter away like it was junk mail. She said my grandmother always tried to make her look like the bad guy. She called Lucy manipulative and controlling, and said this was Lucy's way of turning me against her even from the grave. She said a real mother would have left the money to her own daughter, not skipped a generation to make a point. She was standing in the renovated cooking area I helped pay for without knowing it, calling my dead grandmother manipulative for trying to protect me. I looked at her and said quietly, "She didn't turn me against you. You did that yourself." Something shifted in her face then. The hardness got worse. Her voice dropped and she said, "If you take this to a lawyer, I will tell everyone in this family that you are lying. I'll say your grandmother was losing her mind before she died, and that those documents mean nothing. I'll say you are trying to steal from your own mother." She said it flat, no emotion, like she was reading from a script she'd already written. She wasn't ashamed and lashing out. She had a counter story ready. She'd already decided she would drag Lucy's memory through the dirt, rather than admit what she did. I put the documents back in the box, picked it up, and walked out without looking at her again. On the drive home, I called Jalen and told him about the threat. He said, "Your mom is going to start calling people tonight. Get ahead of this." He was right. I called Clement, my grandmother's son, my mother's brother, the one person in the family who knew both of them well enough to see through it. I hadn't talked to him in years. My mother always made him sound distant, not worth reaching out to. I didn't believe anything she told me anymore. I called him and told him everything. The account, the $80,000, going to the bank, the documents Lucy left, the threat my mother just made. When I finished, Clement went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Your grandmother told me she was worried about this. She asked me to check on you after she was gone, and I didn't. I let your mother keep me away. That's on me." His voice was heavy, not angry, just tired in a way that told me he'd been carrying something a long time. Then he told me something that made the back of my neck go hot. He said my mother had asked him for money twice in the last few years. She said it was for bills. Both times he sent her a few $1,000s because she was his sister and he didn't want her to struggle. He said, "Now I know where my money went to." She hadn't just taken mine. She went to her own brother and told him she was behind on bills while she was sitting in a repainted house with new furniture and a brand new car. Clement said he was going to call the family before my mother had a chance to tell them her version. He said he knew how she worked, that she'd get out in front of it and twist everything until she was the victim. He said, "I'm not letting that happen this time." 2 days later, the texts started coming in. Clement's wife, a cousin, then another. One by one, quietly, the family lined up behind me. Nobody was making a scene. They were just letting me know they believed me and that I wasn't alone. It felt like the first full breath I'd taken since I walked into that bank. My mother wasn't sitting still. That same week, she called me 7 times in one night. I sat on my bed and watched her name appear on the screen and didn't pick up once. She left a voicemail for each call, cycling through every emotion she had. The first one, she was sobbing. She said I was tearing the family apart by going to Clement. The middle ones were guilt trips mixed with yelling, saying everything she did was for me, that the money would have been wasted on me at 19. The last one was quiet, almost a whisper. She said, "If you don't stop this, you won't have a mother anymore." I saved every single one. Then Jalen called me. His voice sounded careful in a way it doesn't usually. He said, "Your mom called me." My whole body went tight. He said she told him I was having some kind of breakdown. She said the inheritance never existed, and that Lucy had been confused near the end, and any paperwork from that time couldn't be trusted. She framed herself as a worried mother reaching out to her daughter's best friend because her daughter was losing touch with reality. Jalen let her talk. When she finished, he told her he'd already seen the documents. She hung up. That was the line for me. She went after the people around me. She wanted Jalen to doubt me. She wanted me isolated. No proof anyone believed. No one standing with me. That's what Lucy was really warning me about, not just the money. She knew my mother would try to make me feel crazy. That's why she left the documents. That's why she wrote the letter. I called the lawyer the next morning and told her to send the demand letter. It went out that Monday. It laid out $80,000 taken, the documentation proving I was the sole beneficiary, the notarized paper, the bank statements. The account closed shortly after Lucy's death. It gave my mother 30 days to respond with a repayment proposal. The lawyer told me to keep my phone on. Expect noise. Expect her to try to pull me into conversations she could later twist. Wednesday night of that same week, someone pounded on my door. Open palm slaps against the wood that made the frame rattle. I heard her voice through it, high and cracked, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. She was saying, "Open this door right now. You are not suing your own mother." I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door and opened it, but didn't step back. I stood in the doorway and held the space. She She was standing in the hall with the demand letter crumpled in her fist. Mascara streaked down past her cheekbones. She held the letter up and said, "Do you know how this makes me look?" That was the first thing she said. Not, "How do we fix this?" Not, "I'm sorry, how does this make me look?" I said, "It makes you look like someone who stole $80,000 from her daughter." She said she didn't steal it, she used it. There's a difference. She made decisions about resources in her household. I told her it wasn't her household's money. I told her Lucy left it to me and she closed the account 3 weeks after the funeral. Something went through her face when I said 3 weeks. She flinched. She didn't know I had the exact timing. 3 weeks after we buried Lucy, while I was still sleeping in Lucy's old sweater because it smelled like her, my mother walked into that bank and closed the account. 3 weeks. She couldn't even wait a month. Her chin started shaking and she said she was drowning back then. That my father had left and she had nothing. Her voice broke and I felt that old pull in my chest. The one trained into me since I was a little girl. The reflex to step forward and make her feel better. Then I thought about the mountain resort, the shopping bags, the salon visits every 2 weeks, the new car driven off the lot, her telling me she was finally living for herself while I worked 2 jobs to make rent. She was never drowning. I stayed where I was and said, "You weren't drowning, you were on vacation, with my money." Her whole body went rigid. The crying stopped like a switch was flipped. Her eyes went flat and something dark moved across her face. She said, "Don't you dare call me that. That was my mother's first name, Olive." Calling her that did something none of the documents did. The proof hadn't shaken her. The bank statements hadn't shaken her. But hearing me say Olive instead of Mom shook her because the documents were about money. The name was about us. It was me telling her that the title she'd been hiding behind for 25 years didn't protect her anymore. I said, "A mother protects her child. A mother doesn't steal from her child and then threaten her when she finds out. You have 30 days. That's more time than you gave me." She turned and walked fast down the hallway, and I heard the building door bang open, and her car door slam, and her engine start, and then nothing. I closed my door and locked it, and then my legs gave out, and I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor with my back against it. I called Jalen. He picked up right away. I said, "I think I just lost my mom." He said, "No, you lost her a long time ago. You just didn't know it yet." 28 days went by, and she didn't call or text or reach out in any way. I counted the days on my phone calendar and went to work and came home and made dinner and waited. On day 29, Clement called. He said Olive had called him that morning, crying, asking him to convince me to drop everything. She said a court case would ruin her. Clement said he listened for 10 minutes and then told her, "You stole from your daughter. I'm not helping you get away with it." He said she went quiet after that. He said she sounded scared. Not the loud scared, not the kind where you push back and yell, the kind where your voice gets thin and you stop fighting because you've run out of room. Day 30 came. I went to work and sat through the whole day without being there. At 4 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was her. I stared at her name for 3 rings and then picked up. Her voice was flat and tired. She said, "I can't pay you back. I don't have it. I spent it. All of it." Just like that. A fact dropped into silence like a stone into still water. I said, "I know you spent it. I've known that for months." She said, "So what do you want from me? Not what can I give back? Not how do I fix this? Just what do I want?" Like we were negotiating. I said, "I want you to say what you did, out loud, to me, right now." The phone went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where someone is thinking. The kind where someone is trying to find a way out of saying it. I waited. Then her voice came, barely there. She said, "I took your inheritance. I took the money your grandmother left for you and I spent it on myself." Each word came out slow, like it cost her something. Then she kept going. She said, "But you have to understand. I felt like I deserved it." Even in the confession, she couldn't just let it sit there. She had to tack on the reason. She had to make sure I knew that even though she took it, she felt entitled to it. Like feeling you deserve something makes it yours. Like wanting something gives you the right to take it from your own child. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just listened to her breathing on the other end. Then I said, "There it is. That's all I needed." She started crying, the slow kind, and said, "You're choosing money over your own mother." I said, "No, you chose money over your own daughter, 10 years ago, and every day since." The line went dead. I sat in the quiet for a while. Then I called Clement and told him she finally said it out loud. He said Lucy would have expected it. He said I did the hard part, and all he did was pick up the phone. He said he should have done more years ago. I told him that mattered more than he knew. Then I called Jalen. I told him she admitted it. He said good, and then neither of us talked. We just sat on the phone together in the quiet for a while until he said, "Lucy would be proud of you." I looked at the photo on my phone, Lucy's letter, her slanted handwriting, the hard pen marks on the last line. I said, "I know," and I meant it. The counter is old. The furniture is secondhand. Nothing here was paid for with someone else's money. Everything in this apartment is M.